Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 290 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, starting with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you today, Richard?
Hey Seth, I am melting. Unlike Crim, I don't have AC, but we're good to go. No one can see this.
It's pretty hot and humid here in New York too, but I have my AC going, so I am getting by. But before we talk about magic stuff, we got another co-host in Crim. How about you, Crim? Are you also melting this morning?
I'm melting and I have an AC, and which, by the way, if there's any guest vocals by my AC, I apologize. But you know what? I'm not turning it off. Sorry.
So our plan for today, we're kind of jumping around a little bit. We're going to kick things off talking about constructed magic. There is new standard stuff going on. There was a Red Bull Untapped qualifier. There is Amonkhet Remastered stuff going on in Historic. So we wanted to talk about that. We also want to talk a little bit about Commander and the reserve list and the prices of some Commander staples, which seem to be going up. So we wanted to get into that a little bit, talk about how the reserve list cards interact with the Commander format. And then today, Mark Rosewater released his State of the Design article for 2020, kind of going over the good and bad of the year from a design perspective. So we want to talk about that a little bit as well before getting to Fishmail, of course. However, before we start talking magic, a reminder that our show today is brought to you by Card Conduit. And if you've ever experienced the hassle of trying to buy list your magic cards, all the sorting, all the shipping, all the typing, it's a lot of work. It's not super fun. Well, Card Conduit, they have you covered. They are the easiest way to sell magic cards. And if you're looking to avoid all those hassles and all that time, this new service from the folks over at Card Hoarder will sort, grade, and sell your magic cards. And once your shipment is processed, you'll get the proceeds minus their fee. And right now, you can get a 10% discount over at cardconduit.com/goldfish. So thank you so much to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some magic. Let's start with standard. So Richard, there's a big Red Bull Untapped qualifier. What are we, like 2 weeks post-banning now? Where is our standard format at? Post-banning, like a month before rotation, where are we at right now in standard?
All right, it's confirmed. Uro and Nissa are still good cards. So last week, Sultai Ramp, was a good deck, but, we're like, okay, maybe the meta will adjust. People will know. People were already gunning for it last week. This week, 27.5% of the field of like 900 odd decks in the Red Bull Untapped 5. Still Sultai Ramp. The interesting thing is it dominated the field. In terms of metagame percentage, the next most popular deck was Teamer Adventures at 8.6%. So people were just basically playing like weird brews, trying to get in under Sultai Ramp. But Sultai Ramp was just dominating. Turns out doubling your mana with Nissa is still good.
I
don't
what
know.
a concept. Oh man.
That's the thing. I will note that the winning deck was actually Is It Aggro? The top 4 is actually Boros Cycling, Mono Black Aggro, and Sultai Ramp. Although 3 of 8 slots were Sultai Ramp in the top 8.
Yeah, so we're up to 27.5%, which is climbing towards, I think, what I would consider the danger zone. I think in general, if you look back at standards historically, when the best deck is like 25% kind of maximum in that range, that's usually when I at least find standard to be in a healthy place. It's like pretty diverse, and I don't really care what the top deck is as long as it's kind of like in that 20-25% range. Like even if it's a miserable deck, you're only playing it one out every like 4 or 5 matches. So it's actually, even if that matchup is miserable, you're just not playing it that much. So my main concern is seeing that metagame percentage keep increasing. So now we're up to 27. It's potentially gonna keep rising because the deck also, from the research I've done, is posting pretty good win percentages across all the formats since, or across all the tournaments that we've had since, the banning. So not only is it heavily played, it also seems really good. Is there any hope, Crim, do you think, for a shakeup in standard before rotation? Obviously, once rotation hits, Narset and Nissa and Tameo and Casualties are all going to be gone. That should hopefully like change up or maybe get rid of Sultai Ramp. But pre-rotation, is this just where we're at? Going to be a lot of Sultai Ramp, you think?
Yeah, this will just be the standard format. I mean, like, it's cool to see some things like, you know, let's say the is it aggros and whatnot, right? But like, oh man, I'm sorry. I've just been, I don't think there's going to be any change, right? I mean, why would there be, right? The like, it just feels incorrect. Like, it's just, I feel like it's strictly incorrect to not play green, blue and green even, right? Cause I mean, you have all the ridiculous things in Uro, and you still have like Nissa, which is doubling your mana, into Hydroid Krasis, which is just, it's hard to beat, right? Like, it feels like that deck doesn't really sacrifice any deck slots to have, you know, like ramp, you know, like usually it'd be like, okay, well, if my deck's loaded with ramp, I'm going to get bodied because I'm going to draw these ramp spells or too many lands late game. Well, the issue here is like everything I do generates like 50 different forms of card advantage. And now there's also a Nissa, like doubling their mana.
I'm honestly not sure how correct it is to refer to it as Sultai Ramp. Like, when you look at it, it doesn't actually have that many pure ramp spells. Like, yes, Uro's a ramp card, Nissa is like a ramp card. So you like kind of incidentally have ramp cards, but this isn't a deck that's like all in on cultivates and arboreal grazers. Like,
true.
It's kind of like Sultai good cards, and it just happens that the good cards also ramp you, which is part of why we've had such busted standards, is like, your ramp spells are also just the best spells in the format, so everyone plays them, and they do really busted things. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I don't expect any, like, huge shakeup. This is most likely, almost assuredly, gonna be the top deck in the format for the next month until we hit rotation. I guess if there's good news, I believe, like, it's the 17th of August today. I believe the 17th of September is when we get the release of Zendikar Rising on Arena. So we're like exactly a month away from rotation. So only 4 weeks to go, which isn't that long. And if there's any good news, well, I think there's two pieces of good news about Standard. One is, I do think that this meta is, even though it might not be exciting, and even though Sultai Ramp is really good in the best deck, like, I still think it's better than, like, 50% Wilderness Wreck or whatever. So I think we took a small step in the right direction. And looking at the Red Bull Untapped, like, outside of Sultai Ramp, is a diversity of decks losing to Sultai Ramp. Like, the top of it, you got Is It Aggro, you got Burrow Cycling, you got Mono Black Aggro, you got Mono Red Aggro, Temur Adventures is floating around, Mono Green Aggro's in there. So there is a bunch of different archetypes that you can play. None of them, I don't think, are going to unseat Sultai Ramp as the best deck in the format, but beyond the top deck in the format, it does seem like the format is pretty wide open as far as, like, the second deck down to, like, the 10th deck or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like, and that, I feel like that's just kind of the way the format's gonna be, right? Like, I don't personally see too many shakeups happening. I mean, what would happen? Like, what deck could take over? I just don't see what could. Like, I mean, Adventures is, like, as Richard mentioned, like, the next best thing, right?
Adventures was a deck that I thought might be able to give the Sultai deck a run for its money as the best deck in the format. But it seems like it's actually fallen back a little bit recently. Like, I did an article in the middle of the week kind of looking at all the tournaments, all the SCG qualifiers and stuff. And as far as, like, win percentage, Temur Adventures was actually with or even ahead of Sultai Ramp. It wasn't as heavily played, but we've seen more recently, a couple of the more recent tournaments, the win percentages went down a little bit. Its metagame percentage, I think, is also went down. It's down to like 8% when it was up in the teens before, like pretty close to Sultai Ramp. So I feel like the format has definitely kind of coalesced around Sultai Ramp, and even some of the, like, the pure spikes that are just trying to play the top deck in the format. I think some of them that were playing Temur Adventures immediately post-banning are now, like, shifting over to Sultai Ramp, and you see Temur Adventures becoming a little less popular and Sultai becoming more popular. Although, if you're thinking about buying into the format, on Arena or something, which I guess you should probably just wait to rotation at this point, but Temur Adventures, it's essentially like rotation proof. It's just all the cards from Throne of Eldraine, so you don't really lose anything outside of like random lands, which will likely be replaced. So if you are looking at getting into the format right now and don't want to wait to rotation, I think I would definitely take a Temur Adventures over Sultai Ramp, just because you have a much better chance of your deck sticking around post-rotation.
Yeah, and you have a Triome.
Is it metagame proof though, Seth? What broken green mana doubling card will they make in the next Magic set to
There's
enable?
still a Nissa. There's still a new Nissa.
I mean, it is. If there's good news, it's that Teamer Adventures has been a decent deck for like a year now. Like, it broke out, last winter or something, not that long after Throne of Eldraine released. So, yes, it has been better or worse. It was much worse during the Wilderness Reclamation metagames. So, it could fall down to tier 3 status again. But I think it's always going to be a good deck. The question is going to be, do we just have like another year of Standard like we just had, where the best decks are so good that none of the second tier decks can really consistently compete with them? So if we get something like that again out of Zendikar, then I guess all bets are off and maybe your Teamer Adventures deck isn't going to be good. But I still think if you don't want to wait and you want to buy one of the top decks now, it's very likely Sultai is going to go away at rotation. Teamer Adventures, I think it's better than a coin flip's chance that it's still going to be like at least a second tier deck after rotation.
I mean, yeah, like you still have Lucky Clover, and you know, like as long as you got Lucky Clover and you're stomping 50 things like simultaneously and bouncing all this other stuff, like I think the deck still has like, you know, still can hold its own. I mean, we'll see, right? Is it going to? There is that new set. It's going to have to do with lands, and you can't really interact with lands, and there is a lot of doubling and whatnot. Like, probably, I don't know. Who knows? I, as you can tell, I've played a lot of Standard in the last 2 years, and like, I'm going into like.
What if they made
I'm
a
already
land
terrified.
that made 2/2 zombies every time you played another
Oh,
land?
don't even start. Don't even start.
Speaking of lands that make 2 zombies, I mean, do you guys have anything else to say about Standard, or should we talk a little bit about the state of Historic, which I think is probably more interesting right now, because we just got Amonkhet Remastered, so we have a ton of new cards, a ton of new stuff going on in the Historic format, including the rise of Field of the Dead. I have to say,
The rise.
The
It
rise.
shouldn't even be here. It shouldn't even be here. Why did it come back?
So I will say, I have not been a Field of the Dead hater. I actually have not found it to be that miserable in Historic pre-Amonkhet Remastered. I mean, yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's probably too powerful, but it's not like I was playing it constantly. And even when I played it, I would beat it sometimes with random like decks that I was playing. So it didn't feel like dominant to me. But now that Hour of Promise is in the format, it's gotta go. Like, I am fully, if there's one thing I've learned about Historics in the last, like, few days since Amonkhet Remastered release, it is, good God, is Field of the Dead busted when you can snag 2 of them, like, on turn 3 or turn 4 at the latest, pretty consistently with Hour of Promise. Now it feels pretty unbeatable to me.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Every time I've played against those decks, I have 3 lands and they're already on, like, Field of the Dead is live. Right? I'm like, huh.
Yes, they're like casting Ugins.
Yeah, I'm like,
and
oh.
Ulamogs, and you're like,
What
oh,
a good
yeah,
turn
that's
4
cool.
play. Turn 4 and turn 5 play. This is very cool. Alright, I'll play my 3rd land. Oh, you pick off 2 of my lands and back at 1. Alright, cool. At least I held this innocent blood for that Ulamog. Like, I cannot tell you enough though, like the Hour of Promise, like nobody's surprised, right? That's the first thing I was like, hey, you know, Amonkhet is Amonkhet block, right? That's the first thing I thought of about Remastered. And because like Hour of Promise, just like you had mentioned, it's like, it's bringing in 2 Field of the Deads. It's already hard enough to beat because you can't interact with it. And you could say, yes, of course, I am a control player, so naturally I would hate that, right? But like, it's also just broken. Like, right? I mean, it is broken. You can't really interact with it. And please don't say Ghost Quarters and stuff like that, because that's not enough. And so, I mean, I don't know. Like, I just despise that playstyle where it's just like, oh, non-interactive. Like, you know, I mean, people are upset about 3 Fairy, but here's this land that, you know, it makes it literally no draw on your deck dead, right? Because no matter what, you always get a threat. And it's just kind of bonkers. I don't know. I'm kind of surprised it stayed this long, and now like Hour of Promise is like, please just remove the card. You had it right the first time. Don't suspend it. Just ban it.
Yeah, that is a concern. Although I will say I have still found Historic to be really fun. While I pretty much auto lose to the Field of the Dead deck now, people are still playing a lot of different things. That's been my experience.
Seb, I think that just means you've come to accept it. Oh, I'm just gonna auto lose it, and they're never gonna ban it.
But, I mean, what do you think, Krim? Has it felt diverse to you? Because I felt like I've still been playing a bunch of different decks. People are trying a lot of new things based on Amonkhet Remastered. Like, I think the Hour of Promise deck is, in my opinion, like, clearly the best deck in the format right now. I think it's unseeded goblins, which I haven't actually seen goblins nearly as much as I used to, at least in best of 3. I rarely run into goblins now, but I've seen a lot of Coco decks. I've seen people trying some of the new-ish tribal decks that got some upgrades. Like, now your Elves deck has Collected Company. Seen tons of Thoughtseizes. Merfolk's another good one.
Yeah.
Thoughtseize definitely everywhere. Wrath of God is another new addition. But what cool stuff have you seen? Obviously, I think they need to suspend Field of the Dead.
Suspend. No. I want a ban. I just want them to go and delete that card.
Ban. All right. I'll go with you on that one. I think they should just ban Field of the Dead, and I hope that it doesn't ruin the Mythic Invitational, which would be really sad. So I'm hoping that they maybe take action quickly, because we're kind of in this
ruining
place
it one way or the other, right? So
we're in a place though where they're actually focusing on historic for tournaments though right now.
Yeah.
Like leading up to Zendikar, we have like the qualifiers historic. We have the Mythic Invitational, which is historic. So it's going to be really sad if we finally get rid of Nexus, which was my big worry. Like, it's just going to all be Nexus decks and I'm not going to watch this tournament. Honestly, just watching everyone make zombie tokens, I don't think that makes for that much better of a tournament than watching people Nexus each other.
I definitely go numb.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. We had a tournament. We have results to take a look at. The MTG Historic subreddit holds, I think it's a weekly tournament. So they had one post-Amonkhet Remastered. 78 decks. The highest represented deck was Burn at 9%. Contrast that to Sultai Ramp in Standard, by the way. But you have Burn, Sacrifice, Azorius Aggro, Mono Blue Temple. They're all coming in at like 6% to 9%. The top 8, Sultai Lands, Jeskai Temple, Gruul Midrange, Azorius Luris, Rakdos Temple, Rakdos Aggro, Mono Red Goblins, Jund Sacrifice. So, is it that bad? Because I haven't played any historic. I'm like, should I draft Amonkhet Remastered? I'm like, Magic Arena's getting expensive. I don't know about this. But, is it salt from other formats? Is it standard, standard Field of Dead just like burned into your brain and causing like these adverse reactions? Or is historic really that bad? Because this tournament seemed to indicate otherwise.
Cause, okay, so on my stream, I stream for 6 hours. And I think the one thing that everybody in chat knew was that I constantly just I must be hogging up all the matchups then. Because I only played against Field of Dead. I'm like, please, just somebody burn me. Like, I just want to eat a lightning bolt or something like that. I'm tired of these darn zombies. I got paired against one burn opponent. I lost. But I got a Sphinx's Red for 2, and I was like so happy. I was like, oh yeah, dude, Sphinx's Red for 2. Oh, I died. Whatever. But like, outside of that, like, I only got paired against Field of the Dead. And I have to say, like, it's kind of miserable. And even though it's beatable, it doesn't change that it's a miserable card, right? It's like, cause technically, Nexus is beatable, right? So, I mean, I'm not saying you can't beat it, but it is just a miserable deck to see, play against. I mean, I guess it could be fun. To play, maybe. But yeah, like, I because of that deck, you see the meta shift, right? Like, mid-range is dead, control doesn't exist. Like, if you are trying to play control, you are very brave. And like, I mean, like, if I'm going to play control, it's gotta have black in it because Virulent Plague is so important, more than it ever has been. And so, like, if mid-range and control can't exist, obviously now everyone's like, well, I've just got to go underneath it. So you're seeing like Luris Boggles, you're seeing Burn, like all these hyper aggro game plans that are just hoping to get them before they go online.
So my experience has been a little different than Crim's. I do think that the Sultai deck is too good for the format. I think the tournament that they had was right after the release of Amonkhet Remastered, and I think the deck has become more popular since then. I think it took people a little while. Like, I think everyone was playing like their initial brews at that tournament. And I don't know if people really realized how good Our Promise getting to Field of the Deads is, like, immediately. But the meta changes so quickly on Arena. I think it's definitely heading in the direction. And I do think that the synergy of Our Promise Field of the Dead is too good. So I would just get rid of Field of the Dead personally. However, I actually have found Historic personally to be in a pretty fun spot. Like, yes, maybe 20% of the time I run to Field of the Dead, and I usually lose to it because that deck's really busted. But the other 80% of the time, I feel like I'm playing a pretty diverse set of matchups. People trying a lot of new things. People like playing some pretty cool brews featuring new cards. So my experience has been that Historic is really good, but I do think that if we're going to have these big tournaments and like Mythic Invitationals and stuff with big money and big prizes on the line, I think the incentive is to like play the best deck. And I'm already convinced that Sultai Lands or some deck grabbing 2 Field of the Deads with Our Promise is the best deck in the format. So
yeah, like, I mean, if you're asking, like, I mean, like, about, like, example, like, I've beaten the Field of the Dead decks. Doesn't mean I had a good time, right? Like,
did it happen like once sometime?
No, like, the Grixis control deck, so yeah, like, there are decks you can play. Like, the Grixis control deck is a lot of fun, and it's actually, like, really solid against it. I've also been playing a ton of, like, Demonic Pacts, and, you know, flickering it, almost like the Pioneer, like, Demonic Pact deck, and, like, it's really, like, it's sweet, and I think the most efficient way that I've found to, like, beat the deck, or at least one of the more humorous ways, is I've been playing Luminous Croxa, and, like, example, it wins through Solemnity, because Solemnity is now in the format, and, you know, like, since we're trying to assemble the combo of Solemnity, Luminous Broodmoth, and, you know, like, Croxa, you know, like, in order to get all those parts together, I like, there's a lot of, just when I want to be ready for burn, I've also thrown 9 lives into the main deck, so now 9 lives, Solemnity allows me to live forever, at least unless they stomp. Then that means I might die. But, and then I found out that, yeah, you could also just assemble with like Fanatical Firebrand, Luminous Broodmoth, and Solemnity. So I've just been using that combo to ping down all of the field players as fast as I can. So I've gone combo.
What happens when they play their Ugin and exile your 9 lives?
You see, that's why I play Gideon's Intervention. The first thing I name is Ugin. Seth. Yeah. I came prepared. I came to play ball. I know about Ugin. Good old Ugin.
I've been messing around with 9 lives too in Solemnity, and yeah, I've been doing the same thing. Gideon's Intervention really key because Ugin is like the biggest blowout. I have been like pretty impressed though with how good the lock can be in a lot of matchups. It's really hilarious if you run into like goblins or something and you just play Solemnity and 9 lives. And,
and it's like
they like make so many goblins and they cast so many Muxes, but they just can't do anything. Like they're literally just drawing dead and spinning their wheels as they do all this stuff. It's actually really funny.
So good. It feels so good. I'm just like, oh, you gonna Muxes me? Oh, okay, all right. Like it's so much fun. Like when you get that combo online, Solemnity is so good because, like, you know, like you'll see the field decks try to like blast zone you, but the blast zone can't get counters.
Yeah, it does. It does just like incidentally cover some of the hate card, like Ratchet Bomb 2, stuff that could like potentially make you lose the game. Solemnity takes care of it. So, what have you thought about Collected Company? Like, how good do you think that is? I think for me, heading into Amonkhet Remastered, obviously, Thoughtseize is going to be everywhere. I don't know how much you can say about that, though, because just, like, if you're black, you play it, because it's really good.
Yeah.
Collected Company was probably next on my list of cards from Amonkhet Remastered that I was like, ooh, like, is this too good for the format? Is it fine in the format? What have the early results been on Collected Company and Historic?
I feel like Coco is, like, it's definitely going to get even more powerful over time, at least for Historic's power level, but, I mean, Grafdigger's Cage has more stock now, I guess. I mean, like the card is still really good. Like you're starting to see like the Gen Sacrifice decks play it now, and they don't even like they want to hit mana dorks because they're just trying to get to the 6 mana Bolas' Citadel. But I've been playing a Golgari Coco deck that really is just mono green splashing black for Rotting Regisaur, and that's been a lot of fun. So I think Coco is a really good card. Is it too strong though? No, not yet. Not yet. It gives aggro a shot. I think it's like the tool that aggro needs.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been my impression too. Like, it is good, and it's definitely seeing a decent amount of play across decks. Like, there's a bunch of different archetypes that can play it, but it hasn't felt oppressive to me by any stretch. Like, it's definitely a good card, and people are building around it, but I think at this point at least, it's very safe in the format. Is there anything, Krim, or Richard, you haven't really played much, have you, Richard? Have you played any Historic recently?
I haven't played Amonkhet Remastered. I played right before that, and I played a Field of the Feel of the Dead.
Oh, Rich. Boo.
I told you what happened, right?
I'm done.
It started at Thragtusk, and I'm like, I need to ramp. I'm not getting Thragtusk fast enough. So I start ramping into Thragtusk, and then I spent all this time ramping. I'm like, why am I casting a Thragtusk? I'll just cast an Ugin or something, right? Might as well put some Field of Deads in there. And then I just like naturally evolved into a Field of the Dead deck.
Shave the Thragtusk.
And I'm like, oh, this is not the Thragtusk deck I was looking for.
I tried so hard to make Thragtusk work. I played the Unicorn from Jumpstart just to blink it. I'm like, look, I'm doing it, Ma. I'm playing fair magic. I think I blinked Thragtusk like 5 times and lost.
And you're like, here's a 5/3, gets jumped by a 2/2. Okay, oh, he has 2 zombies. I can't attack now. Oh boy.
How do I ever get through?
Is there anything that's been especially disappointing out of Amonkhet Remastered? Anything that you were like hyped for, but it's just kind of like not worked out as much as you would have liked?
Okay, this is gonna sound crazy, and I love the card like to like ridiculous levels, and maybe it's too early, but the Scarab God kind of was not like he's still good. Like the Scarab God's still a power magic card, but it's not what it once was. Right? Like it's definitely just a 5-mana 5/5, and usually when I untap with it, I don't always win.
Yeah, that's one that surprised me too. I thought that Scarab God might be one of the best cards from Amonkhet Remastered, and at least so far, it really hasn't been. Although I do wonder how much like, you were talking about your Sphinx's Rev for 2 and then dying to zombies, and like how bad control is and mid-range is. I wonder if Field of the Dead ends up getting banned or becoming less popular or whatever. Like, I wonder if that opens it up for Scarab God to be a lot better. I wonder how much of it is the meta is just like super hostile to not just Scarab God, but anything that's like in Scarab God's wheelhouse as far as mid-range or control strategies.
See, like before, like you'd see Scarab God in like all sorts of decks, but like you'd also see control play it, right? And I think where I'm at currently, I don't think control needs it. I wouldn't play it in control. I would play it in mid-range because that's where it felt best. Like, I built a Grixis mid-range deck and it felt pretty solid there, but it's, once again, still isn't the powerhouse that it was, but it's still pretty good there. But in control, it's not that great. A card that has caught me by surprise and like how efficient it has been is Commit to Memory.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Narset.
I have not cast any yet, but yeah, I could imagine that actually being pretty good in the format.
I've been wheeling people all day long, because, like Narset and then, just cast that, whatever. I'll usually on their Hour of Promise or whatever, and then I just wheel, right? Although I did have it happen where I did that, I wheeled and they drew into Ugin. And I'm like, okay, all right, that's a problem.
Oh, Crim finds ways, even if they ban Teferi, you still find ways to just play fun fair magic. Wheeling people with Narsets. It doesn't matter what they ban, Crim finds a way.
But you gotta remember, I'm wheeling people and still losing.
Oh. All right. So, any other thoughts on Historic or Amonkhet Remastered, or should we move on to our other topics?
Glorybringer is still good. Glorybringer is still a magic card.
Yeah.
Soulscar Mage is probably better than I thought it would be, and it was already really good to me. And so far, I mean, like, no surprise. Thoughtseize is great, but one thing that I see a lot of people often asking me is, well, in my Grixis control deck, is Thoughtseize, like, soon as, Thoughtseize comes out, I'm assuming that just replaces the Thought Erasures. It's not an auto replace. Maybe in some decks where, like, the Thoughtseize is backed up by, like, a clock or a mid-range game plan, sure. But, like, in Grixis control, I would not play it just because of the fact that I'm losing 2 health, and that is actually a real cost. On top of that, the setup for my next turn through Surveil of Thought Erasure is actually more valuable, and it makes it so that it's not a miserable top deck. So, that's another thing I wanted to just mention.
Wow. I was not expecting the Thought Erasure is better than Thoughtseize.
In my Grixis control deck, I have found it to actually just be better to play Thought Erasure because seriously, I don't have to worry about losing 2 life, and the Surveil is big. Cause cause the last thing you want to do is top deck a Thoughtseize, right? And when you're in a top deck war. when your Grixis deck is all about grinding your opponent outright, hitting them with the early disruption, like maybe then just like trying to win through any of your threats. But then when you draw Thoughtseize, like, oh man, please, I'd rather have just not drawn this turn. But Thought Erasure, I at least get to Surveil. So there is something there for that.
I can see that. I don't know if I'm convinced that I would ever, well,
in a control deck, you gotta remember,
if I would often play Thoughtseize over Thought Erasure, but I can see your arguments. I can see what you're saying.
In most decks, I will still play Thoughtseize, but it has to be a deck where I know I can recoup that life. And, you know, like, when it's all about top deck wars, I definitely don't want to, like, I want to set up my draws, right? So, I think that, like, Thought Erasure is way more important in some decks. Not that I'm not saying that is a more powerful card, because in a vacuum or whatever, like, obviously Thoughtseize is a better card. It's more mana efficient and whatnot.
I'm still waiting for the 2020 play design refresh of discard cards that like Ramp got. So like,
oh yeah,
one mana Thoughtseize. No, then you can miracle it for like a 6/6 beater and like gain 3 life. so it's not a bad card late game. So you can just top deck it and like still be ahead. I'm just waiting.
2021 Thoughtseize would be instant speed. Oh, and it would draw you a card.
That'd be pretty good. And if you don't discard anything, it cycles. So if you whip, and if for some reason they draw it on their next draw phase, you get to draw a card too. Just to get that feel bad where like you discard a card and they draw another one, you're like, what? You get to draw one too now.
That sounds like a good card. You know what? Print it. You can have that. That's free. You don't even have to worry about like paying anybody for that. You can have that.
To counter that, they'll just supercharge Veil of Summer. Now like ancestral recalls.
All the spells for the rest of the game are uncounterable and have extra from black and blue. Draw a card anytime your opponent would cast a spell. You literally just get an emblem for 1 mana. Oh no, it'll be balanced. It'll be 2 mana. Double green.
All right, let's move on and hit up some of our other topics. So one of the things that happened over this the weekend that I wanted to talk to you guys about is Gaia's Cradle shot up to $1,000. It's come down a little bit to like $840 since its peak, but it was $1,000 this weekend, and this kind of led to a big conversation. And I should say, even though Gaia's Cradle is kind of emblematic of reserveless cards in Commander seeing price spikes, this week we also saw like Tithe doubled in price, Memory Jar doubled in price, Opalescence doubled in price, Humility. There's a huge list. What was your one, Krim?
Oh, I mean, like, yeah, Gilded Drake is like 300 now, right? Like,
yeah.
Obviously, though, everybody's just really upset about, you know, like Elvish Farmer. You know, like that is the card that everybody's upset about.
So reserveless cards are going crazy. They were already expensive, and now they are getting even more expensive. And it seems like the finance community perhaps is like kind of focusing in maybe on reserveless Commander cards. So that's neither here nor there. The reserve list, we've talked about it before. I think that all of us agree if we had a choice, we would have a reserve list go away, but that doesn't seem to be an option on the table. One of the things that came up in the conversation about Gaia's Cradle, though, was should we just ban reserve list cards in Commander? With how high the prices already are, and the fact that they're likely to just keep increasing, because that's what we've seen so far, are we at the point where the solution is just to be like, all right, these cards are banned? Or do you think we'll get to that point with the direction that we're heading?
I personally would love to see like the ban list, or I mean the reserve list banned, to be honest with you. I think that we will get to that point where it has to be talked about, right? I mean, but at the same time, I guess at the same time, you could also just say, well, if it's, you don't need a Gaia's Cradle to play the deck, right? You could play the one from Ixalan. That card spiked up too. That's like $30 now. By the way, I didn't know that.
Okay, let's be real. You cannot replace Gaia's Cradle with anything.
You can't. But you know,
it's like saying replace your dual land with the Guildgate. I'm like, you can, but it's like a significant difference. In fact, Gaia's Cradle is so important to Gaia Cradle's decks that you can't even compare it to Guildgate to dual land, right?
But like that's the thing. Like, so like, do you think that I think that obviously it should just be banned. Like all those cards should be banned. I'm somebody who owns part of that, and I'm sure it would take a hit, but I don't care. I'd rather just like have it be a fun format where people don't need $1,000 cards.
I mean,
so like,
yeah. I mean, I agree it's a problem, right? I don't think anyone's sitting here saying it's not a problem. But rather than banning like all of these cards, reprint them. Like, sure, you can't print a Gaia's Cradle. What if you make something similar that's just as good or better? Then players can actually use this card in their deck. The super spikes will have to buy both cards, right? Like, someone will always have the advantage when they have the original Gaia's Cradle. But if you make a cradle that's better or just the same that you can tutor up or whatever, then you can effectively have the same deck and you just lose a few percentage points as opposed to like your entire deck if you don't have the cradle. So I think just like start printing these cards. Like there's no reason they can't make a better, just like literally make Gaia's Cradle, except it taps to add colorless with no creatures on the board. Done. Right?
And it's a forest, so Nissa can double the mana.
Sure, it can be. Wait. If it was a forest, what does Nissa actually read? Would it actually double straight
It makes
up?
a forest. No. It would just add, right?
Okay.
I mean, so I think the thing is, I like your idea, Richard, although the problem is in the past when people have brought up this idea to Wizards, they always say like, oh, well, we want to adhere to the spirit of the reserve list, even though that isn't technically breaking the reserve list because it's a different card. It's got different text on it. The spirit of the reserve list would be violated if we printed a almost Gaia's Cradle that was just slightly tweaked to get around the reserve list. So I feel like that's the sticking point. Maybe Wizards has changed their philosophy on that. I feel like they're going to have to do something. Like, Commander is essentially keeping paper Magic afloat at this point. I mean, partly because of the metagames, but also partly because of the pandemic. Commander is the one thing paper Magic has going for it. So I feel like if people start getting priced out of Commander, paper Magic just would not have anything going on at all. Like, what does paper Magic have going for it if people start or stop playing Commander because they're getting priced out of some of these staples? I would prefer not to have to ban the cards, but I would prefer Wizards to just get rid of the reserve list. That's my preferred solution. They haven't really seemed to be accepting of that idea, though, so who knows if or when that would ever happen. If it came down to it, though, I think I would be okay with them banning it. Like, if they refuse to get rid of the reserve list, and they refuse to use Richard's idea because of the spirit of the reserve list, I feel like just banning the reserve list would be better than where we're at now or where we're heading with some of these cards just being so ridiculously expensive. And if it was just Gaia's Cradle, whatever, like, sure, there would be decks that people couldn't play, but this is like, there's a lot of cards and all the like $40 ties and $300 gilded drakes. Commander's becoming a very expensive format if you want to have the staples of that format, and it just keeps heading more and more in that direction. So I do think this is like a legitimate concern. So I don't know. I think bannings would be better than doing nothing, although I would hope that Wizards could find a solution that did not involve banning all the reserve list cards.
I have to hard disagree. I'd rather do nothing than ban due to pricing. Like, because like, where do you draw the line there, right? Like, do you start banning $100 mythics from standard or, $100 cards that haven't been reprinted? Like, it's such a weird slippery slope. Like, especially on something that Wizards can't acknowledge and control. Like, you can't control pricing, right? So like, how can they balance anything? So I would rather them do nothing, have these cards skyrocket. Let's say Cradle's like $5,000. Look, normal people aren't going to play this card, right? So if you're trying to play CEDH, yeah, tough, right? It becomes vintage. Well, it basically is vintage, right? But the normal people won't play it, right? So if Wizards refuses to reprint these cards, then you just will never see a Gaia's Cradle. And then when you see one in the wild, it'll be a treat for you and you'll get crushed because they have Gaia's Cradle, right? But like, I think that's it, right? Like, you're just not gonna play a Cradle deck. Just like, we don't play vintage because it's too expensive for us, right? Like, it's just, I don't know.
We
doesn't mean you gotta like kill vintage just because, I can't play it, right? Like, so I'd rather just leave it.
There is still the fact that we have the World Championship decks, the gold bordered cards. And on top of that, I guess at the end of the day, if people wanted to play it, it isn't a sanctioned like, it's not like a competitive format, right? So proxies. I mean, I would or not proxy, like a token or whatever, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, the thing, like the gold border cards are fine. What about, can we not have more of those?
What happened to them? I remember there was some reason why they stopped making the gold bordered cards.
I don't remember the reason, although there is one. Although I will say, I think Gaia's Cradle is $100 in gold border now.
Yeah.
So it's not like that is actually cheap. I think you brought up a really good point about proxies though, and I wanted to mention that too. Like, I would heavily encourage local playgroups to take advantage of that. And I will say, like, when I say proxy, I'm talking about like Sharpie on a basic land. Like, don't buy counterfeit cards. Like, even if you want to use the like, oh, I'm never going to sell them, it's not hurting you're like helping perpetuate a system that is a real threat to the health of paper Magic. So even if you think like, oh, I'm not going to do anything bad with these cards, you're still like being part of the problem if you're supporting people making counterfeit cards. So don't buy counterfeit cards. But I do think that playgroups should be very accepting of people playing like actual proxies that are not designed to mimic real cards, can't accidentally trick someone into thinking they're real cards. Like, Sharpie up a basic land with Gaia's Cradle on it, play Growing Rites of Itlimoc, just like your play it already flipped. Like, that's already like a pretty natural proxy. It's pretty much the same thing. Like, so I think that people should be way more accepting of that, because I do want people to feel like they can experience all the format. And I definitely could see how in a playgroup, if you have one person that's got the Gaia's Cradle going on every week and you're like, you know, working on $100 budget, that would probably get old after a while. So I think it's one way that you can kind of even things out a little bit across budgets in your playgroup. So I think that's definitely something that playgroups should embrace more. Yeah.
I mean, like, on top of that, like, you've seen some of like the proxies in the way that like they're obviously not real. Like, they're printed on, like, I don't know, like the Avengers art or something like that. Avengers Tower, right? Like, you can actually even have fun with that and really get more expressive with your stuff, right? Like, so, I mean, I think that's really cool. And I think that group should definitely be more welcoming to proxies.
Just wait it out. They'll make a new digital client for Arena, for Commander. Just watch. I mean, it will happen, right? Like 3 years in the future, like, Commander is the only thing that sells. Everything sucks. You know, people are dying to turn 1 Euros or something. Like, no one's playing Standard. How do we take advantage of all these Commander players? I got an idea. We'll make Arena 4 players, right? And then they'll eventually migrate everyone on. And once they're on a digital platform, they can, quote unquote, reprint whatever they want, right? Like, there is no, the reserve list does not apply to online. So, if Wizards really, really is trying to skirt addressing this, eventually when Commander is online, and I fail to see how it will not come online, right? As long as it doesn't just literally die off, it will come online somehow eventually on that platform. You can do all the cradles you want, but you know, Wizards, it'll be like quadruple mythic or something and be super hard to get because it's highly desirable. So yeah, but I think digital will also fix this just by itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Yeah. And I could definitely see a Commander-focused digital client. I think Wizards actually, like, suggested that at one point when people were asking about the possibility of Commander coming to Arena, and they're like, that's not really in the plans, but, you know, we're making a lot of games these days, and who knows, like, in the future, if maybe there would be something like that. So I think that is definitely a possibility. Plus, from Wizards' perspective, then they have, like 3 digital clients that people have to buy cards for, and your collections don't carry over, so I'm sure they would love that too. All right. We have one more topic before we get to Fishmail. And that was this morning, Mark Rosewater released his State of Design article for 2020, which is a series he's been doing since 2005, where he goes over the sets of the year, talks about the good and the bad, also a little bit about the overall year of Magic design. So, what do you guys think? Like, this was one I was actually really waiting for because I guess, as Mark said, it was a roller coaster of a year with many highs and many lows, which I think is definitely true. So I was very interested to see Mark's perspectives on it. We don't have a ton of time, but what were some of the highlights for you guys from this article? Is there anything that really stuck out?
Well, let me tell you literally the highlights as pointed out by Mark Rosewater, because there's 3 of them. Overall Magic design. A lot of Magic was purchased and played. Says this was like they sold the most Magic. There's the most Magic players. It's bigger than ever. There was plenty of design innovation. And booster, fun, and collector packs were a hit. So those are the 3 highlights. Lessons was balance issues. We need to get better about thinking about the ramifications on all different formats, calling out Commander, Standard, Best of 1 Standard, Modern, Historic, etc., instead of just Standard and Limited. And the year could have been more mechanically cohesive. So talking about not having blocks. So those were the kind of 6 takeaways. And then he goes in set by set into like more detail.
Yeah. And like, I'm gonna agree with some of the stuff that he mentions on the sets was like, it's true, right? Like example, like Adamant, like I kind of forgot that was a Throne of Eldraine mechanic. Is there even an Adamant card being played?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, like I thought that like Adamant was so forgetful, but otherwise, like I mean, like okay, if you ignore Oko and the shenanigans that were going on in Throne of Eldraine, the set was a lot of fun, right? Like the fairy tale design, as he had mentioned, was a hit, and I agree. I loved the art style. I loved a lot of that. I just wish I remembered what Adamant was, and I can't remember. There was some 3-mana Planeswalker. I think it was pretty good as Oko, that set was, I really liked Eldraine. Like, right? Like, Adventures was sweet. I thought Adventures was really sweet. And he had mentioned that, the Godzilla tie-in was like a solid, like a plus. People liked it. So this means that I could have hope that we have more reskins. I would love to see more reskins. And that was something that I really wanted to have happen. That's why I hope that the reskins did well from Ikoria. And it looks like it did. And he also mentioned one of the things I had a weird issue with Return to Theros or whatever, and it was that Kroxa and Ura, we only had Simic and Rakdos. What about the other 2 color combinations? So I do hope we get to see more of those Titans somewhere down the line. Obviously, I hope they're not as Uro-y and more Kroxa-y.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that he mentioned the adapting to the blockless world, because that's something that we've talked about, is how you only have 1 set to push a mechanic or a theme enough for it to show up in Standard. You only have 1 set to get all the flavor stuff you want in there. And I think if you read through a lot of what he discussed about various sets, and also kind of look at the bannings we've had with certain like mechanics being really pushed, I think a lot of it does come back to that, really, to just not having these blocks. Like even what you mentioned, Krim, about there's supposedly like 5 Titans, but we only got 2 of them. They mentioned one of the other downsides is people expected all the gods to return in Theros, but we only got some of them. And that's a direct impact of only being on Theros for 1 set. There's only so many mythic slots to go around, so something's not going to show up there. So I do think that that's something that hopefully will naturally improve as Wizards, has another year or 2 of designing these 1 set block in under that structure, that hopefully that'll naturally get better. The other thing that stuck out to me is I did feel my overall impression was I did feel like it was a little deflecty about some of the issues where some of it was kind of like, hey, it's not really my job to balance cards, but, maybe with having companions and mutate in the same set, maybe I made it a little too tough on play design and they, couldn't actually balance everything. So I felt like I wish there was a little bit more in-depth discussion about what went wrong. Like, yeah, we know that companions went wrong, but like, what actually led us there, and how are we going to avoid having that happen again in the future? So I wish it went a little more nuts and bolts in depth on some of those topics, personally.
Well, this is state of design,
I would love to see
not
that.
State of play design, right? So this is more about, like, was the theme of big monsters a hit in Ikoria, right? Did you feel like you were in a fairy tale in Throne of Eldraine? Kind of like that's kind of what he touched upon, rather than was Standard balance, was 3 fairy the problem all along? Like, that's another article, which I don't even know if they're going to release. But yeah, the Maro kind of plays the role of community outreach manager when he in fact is a designer. So he kind of gets pinned all these problems. But I do think It's interesting. Like, apparently designing boosters is under his domain. And the fact that collector boosters were a hit. Also note, Secret Lair was not mentioned in here. I don't know what's up with that. Is Secret Lair a hit or not? But kind of to me, collector boosters, Secret Lair, VIP boosters, people complain endlessly about these things, but they always sell out. And Wizards, in fact, is saying they sold out and, they're a big hit. So it kind of tells you like the kind of Twitterverse or Reddit subreddit is a small minority, right? People love to complain and then they buy everything anyway. Double masters promos are like, increasing in price, meaning everyone wants them and they're actually being bought out. And then the last thing was more Magic is being played than ever. So last year was War of the Spark, and War of the Spark was a really big thing for Magic. It brought back a lot of new players. So the fact that there's still more players this year and it's still going strong, I don't know what that tells me. It's good for Magic, but B, like everyone loves Uro and Oko, and like I don't know what that means, right? Like if you do these things, you know how this looks when we do our metrics meeting, right? When you do these things,
yeah,
right, and you see the numbers go up, what are you gonna do? You just gonna do more of it, right? Like so what does that mean?
Please.
Does that mean new players?
No, don't, please don't. I don't even want to hear this next part. Please, please, no more.
Like everything we've complained about, but Magic had like its best year ever. So does that mean it's just going to continue into 2021? Like I'm not.
Let's not talk about that.
I'm not sure. Maybe we are like the boomers, right? We're like, yeah, right. All the new players are like, yeah, Oko, Uro, Fuel the Dead, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's actually true. I haven't thought about that. There are people where this is their first taste of Magic, right? And they're like, oh, is Oko not the norm? and I'm just. And that is so true, and that is terrifying, actually. Just truly terrifying.
I will say, though, I think Eldraine to me, Eldraine is the new Innistrad. So for me, I really like that set. Like, Ikoria really didn't hit the spot for me. I think they totally missed, like, I hate it when they say, oh, we made monsters, but what we thought monsters were and not what, 99% of the population thinks of monsters, right? Like, I hate it when they do things like that, where they're like, yes, let's make dwarves, but dwarves, that not the dwarves in your mind, but the dwarves we're thinking of, right? And, because you should accept that, right? Like, I just don't like that. And I think Ikoria showed that. Like, you mutated a bunch of small synergistic things into a small synergistic creature. That's not what I'm thinking of when I think monsters. I'm thinking like 2020 trample, hexproof vigilance, right? That's what I'm thinking. So yeah, I think they kind of missed it on Ikoria, but Eldraine to me is the new Innistrad. Like I'd love to see a return to this plane. All the cards are super flavorful. The promos are really well done. So everything I think regarding Eldraine was a hit. And I'll even accept Oko.
I'm on the other side of Ikoria, where I love the idea of their monsters. I thought that was sweet. My issue was how powerful they were. I think they could have, like Dirgebat, they could have definitely lowered the mana cost on that, right? Like, I wish we got, cause like, I don't know. I mean, I want to see more mutate. I want to see more things like that. And I like their idea behind their world of monsters. I just wish the monsters were playable.
And I mean, I think it's hard to hit every expectation. And I think one of the things they mentioned was they tried to have a lot of different, like, monster motifs in the set. So, maybe the Godzilla cards felt like traditional, like, monster stuff, and some of the other stuff didn't. And I think that's one of the challenges when you have a game that's so big, and when you hear monsters, you think of all different things. I remember this happening with, I think it was Theros, when they said, oh, it's an enchantment theme block, and then it was all, like, bestow type stuff, enchantment creatures, and a lot of people were like, well, it doesn't really feel like what I think of as an enchantment theme, even though like a huge percentage of the cards were enchantments because of bestow and enchantment creatures. So I think that definitely is one of the big challenges that comes up like throughout designing Magic sets. Personally, I think that Mutate ended up in a pretty good place. I think the mechanics of the mechanic are going to make it hard for ever to be like truly constructed playable, because you're just like setting yourself up to get X for 1. So I think that, but even despite that limitation, like we've had Mutate decks, we've had, I would consider those monster themed decks that have shown up in standard and have some success. So I think for me, I was pretty happy with how that aspect of Ikoria actually landed.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Grim.
I guess I'm not gonna lie to you. I thought Core 2021 would be my favorite set of all time, but there really wasn't enough Teferi. I'm sorry. I was so hyped on spoiler season for this set. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. I love the reprints. I loved all that stuff, but only one Teferi?
Yeah.
Where's my common Teferi? Where's my uncommon Teferi? Where's my rare Teferi? Terrari, if you would. And then mythic Teferi. You know what I mean? Like, where are all of these?
I think marketing it as a Teferi set was a little weird because they had like the vertical cycles for all the planeswalkers. So I'm not really sure how it's more of a Teferi set than it is a, you know, any other choose Garruk or whatever other planeswalker in the set. It seemed like they all had more or less like equal treatment in the set. So I think I'm glad there wasn't like 5 Teferis or something in the set, but I do think that calling it a Teferi set was probably like a bit of a miss marketing wise. And I think Mark mentioned that too, that a lot of people expected what you expected, Grim, that there was going to be like a bunch of different Teferis similar to how Chandra was the last core set. And then maybe they didn't quite meet expectations, with only having like the amount of Teferi cards they did.
Yeah. Like I mean, I like the enchantment. And I like the whole, like, oh, Teferi's protege, but, like, I really did think because how Chandra got that love, right? Like, I thought Teferi would get a ton more, and I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm a little underwhelmed by it. Like, it was just really just a core set with a Teferi in it.
Anyway, any other thoughts on Maro's article, or should we hit up a couple of Fishmail before we run out of time today?
All right. We're totally over time, but there was a new announcement. While we were podcasting, Secret Lair Oozes was announced.
I already purchased it.
Wow. Acidic slime, scavenging ooze, mimeoplasm, void slime in a very unique art style. I don't know how to describe it.
It's Adventure Time. It's like Adventure Time, Steven Universe, that kind of like cartoony art, but it's got like that kind of like horror style, like, you know what I mean? It looks great.
It does look really sweet.
Like, $30.
And the flavor text. Yeah. $30. Huh. And the flavor text is perfect on that void slime. It's literally a mage getting like bodied and it just is cyclonic and then he's like cut off and it's a bunch of like spam. Like, it's so good. It's so good. Like that flavor art, that flavor text is perfect. Like almost, I think all the flavor text, all the artwork, I am a huge fan of this set.
Yeah, this is definitely top tier, I would say, art-wise for me as far as the secret layers that they've done so far. As far as value, are any of these cards actually like... What's a money card in here? Like, I think this is one that you're pretty much buying for the art, more or less. Because I think I was thinking maybe mimeoplasm had value, but that's like $4. Scavenging was only like $1 now. So you're not going to get a lot of value in terms of like, if you bought the original versions of these cards, it would be much, much cheaper. But the art is definitely super sweet. And these cards are pretty playable. Like, mimeoplasm is a popular commander. Ooze sees a lot of play in a bunch of formats. Acidic slime, another really good commander card. So you're going to have some like really unique art to kind of bling out your commander deck or whatever if you pick it up.
Yeah, yeah, strictly speaking from value, I think if we were just adding up all the like normal copies, I think this may be $15. But the art and all of that, yeah, like this is definitely that one where if you're into this art style, you love the Adventure Time vibes, you know, like that kind of stuff, you're going to want this. It's so cool. And it's cheap, so.
All right. Let's move on to Fishmail. If you have a question, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air. First question from Andrew7821698. This question is for Krim. As a fellow control player in a commander game of 3 friends, I tend to have the most fun when I'm making everyone miserable. How do you manage your desire to be oppressive with letting the table have fun?
You know, that's like, okay, so how I essentially let the table have fun is sometimes, you know, you just gotta be like, you know what? I can answer that anyway. So you pretend you don't have anything. You're just like, okay, that's fine. You can do that. You can do whatever. That's legitimately what I do in my like play groups. I'm just like, all right, that resolves. I just let things go through and then I'll dig myself out of that hole later.
I'm going to say, I don't know how much you let us have fun.
I mean, okay.
Rather, we're like, we've had enough, Krim. We're going to have fun. So we're going to force our way in.
maybe you're right. Maybe I view it as like that way, but like realistically, I think maybe it's just I never ease off the gas pedal, and the fun was really like, what is it again? Like, there's a finite amount of fun, and I'm looking to have all of it. So I guess
it's whether
there is no way to manage.
RNG loves us or not. Does he have counterbalance top, and does he have the right cards on the top 3 cards of his deck?
It's like you got to throw a sweet mini game into the game, right? Like that's so much fun. What happens with top? Who knows? Find out.
All right. Rops007. Have you ever investigated the possibility of selling an arena account or running multiple accounts to be more efficient at getting wild cards?
Ooh. Well, I know selling your account was against the terms of service. I don't know how that's enforced, but I think in general, probably not the best idea. As far as running multiple accounts, the problem is you can't really trade. So I don't know, like, I guess you could, I don't know. Would there be any possible benefit to having multiple accounts since you can't actually trade cards between the accounts? It seems like you're setting yourself up for frustration because so many of your cards come from like your reward packs or packs that you get from drafting or whatever. And then those are going to be locked into your account. So I feel like you're going to end up with like half of Sultai Ramp in one account and half on the other account and not be able to play Sultai Ramp on either account.
I mean, it's probably possible. So like, for example, what you could do is grind quests on both accounts, right? So then you get double the quests. And then on one account, you use your wild cards for one deck. And on the other account, you use your wild cards for the other deck. Whether this is actually worth it, I don't know. Because like, what if you open a card for the other deck on this account or whatever, right? Then like it might throw everything out of whack. But it is a way to double up on your daily quests and maybe even double up on like the mastery tree and things like that. Is it actually good and do people do it? I am not sure. You'd actually have to do the math, but it seems like a lot of work.
It is. And it's really the only reason why people would do it is just for like the meme, really, like to have a Smurf account, but like there's no point, right? It's like, it's not like this is like an MMO or something, right? Or this isn't like Overwatch where I need to have, sorry, I gotta keep this card, like this account's MMO at like gold, right? Like some people do it just for the fun, like to hit like Mythic twice in Limited or Mythic in Constructed twice.
I'm gonna make a Smurf account right now. My name's gonna be like the barcode, so
not
you can't
Richard.
So you can't Google me. Okay, and then instead of being bronze 3, I'll be bronze 4, and I can play under my elo and rack up some wins.
Like, see, that's what I mean. Like, there's no reason to ever play under your elo in Magic.
Well, the thing is, there is no elo in Magic, right? Because the ladder resets all the time. So unless you're actually constantly grinding, you're always at some perpetually like super low rank that you're not supposed to be at, which is awkward. All right. God of Grenades, after seeing Amonkhet Remastered and the annoyances in current master products, what are your thoughts on paper remastered sets, a way to reprint cards at lower cost as well as get out of necessary reprints at a high print run?
I mean, I would like to see paper remastered sets. I would like to see them just straight up reprint some old sets, like just release more booster boxes of like Innistrad or other popular older sets. I do think people might be disappointed if they do it in paper, because I would be surprised if they went for normal like $4 a pack. It seems more likely to me that if they did do like a remastered set in paper, they might try to price it like more Masters set, or at least like in the middle, like Modern Horizons, where you're getting in like $6 or $8 a pack. So I don't know if it would like be a super awesome deal from most players' perspectives, but I think it would be a ton of fun, because right now, if you look at like Zendikar or Innistrad, like those boxes are ridiculously expensive, and those are some really cool draft formats. So it'd be sweet from a limited perspective. Plus you get more supply out in the market as far as reprints as well. So seems like a win-win to me.
All right, last question. Andrew Desythe, with the new cards being added to Arena with new Arena-only art such as Thoughtseize and Coco, do you think the art will remain digital only, or will they release it in paper via Secret Lair or some other outlet?
I think it will show up in paper eventually. We've seen it happen a few times with Magic Online, where they have printed new art for some random old cards, released it on Magic Online, and then later have that art show up in paper. So whether it takes like a year or like 5 years, who knows? But I think there's a good shot that a lot of the art that's showing up first on Arena will eventually show up in paper too.
I hope that. I mean, I always hope that though. Like what the Mana Drain promo, like I love that promo. So like seeing that artwork, but I actually don't know when, like specifically with that card, when and which happened first. Like did the artwork appear on like, you know, Magic Online first and then it got the paper promo, or was it the other way around for Mana Drain?
Ooh, I am actually not 100% sure either. I would have to research it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love a lot of the promo artworks that I see on Magic Online, so I really hope we can see more of those come to paper.
Yeah, usually it's Judge promos when they're released. I highly doubt Secret Lair because you're expecting like new art or like in the case of Slimes, like some special style. So I really doubt Secret Lair, but the Magic Online promos or alternate arts usually are released as like Judge promo arts or something like that. All right, I think that wraps up Fishmail. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions this week. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 290 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard Krebs, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes down in the world of Magic. I think we're going to have some Commander Legends spoilers coming this weekend, so should have some sweet stuff to talk about. Until then, have a wonderful week, and this is the crew signing out.